I don't think I'm the only one who's curious about exactly how far the secret government infrastructure goes. But it's undeniable that one exists. At a minimum, there are dozens of estimated secret bunkers and hidden military installations for the continuity of government in case of nuclear attack or other extreme scenario, and many people know that it was put into operation on the day of 9/11. And for years, I've heard the accounts and the rumors about the network of secret underground bases connected by railway tunnel with hyperfast trains spread out all across the country. But because of the very nature of these secret underground structures, it's very difficult to confirm. And besides, a lot of it gets caught up in stories about extraterrestrials and crazy things allegedly going on in these places. But I thought I would start closer to the surface, no pun intended. I've been looking through some declassified Cold War materials, and I came across the Deep Underground Command Center that was officially proposed in 1962, and it was considered for the 1965 budget, and it was originally shot down by President Kennedy and his cabinet, but as we all know, he was assassinated, and a great deal of things took place, which have never been officially acknowledged, but this was officially a plan for a deep underground bunker. And when I say that, I'm not dismissing structures that are immediately underground, 20, 40, 50, 60 feet. There's tunnels here. We were in it, and it goes on for miles, I'm pretty sure. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about installations that are 3,000 to 4,000 feet underground, up to a mile underground, where underground cities, small bases, large bases, and who knows what else have been built. Interestingly, this was first proposed at the executive level at the beginning of 1962, a year that would see the Cuban Missile Crisis and a lot of very tense Cold War standoff issues and the possibility of all-out nuclear war. And this was the time of the Dr. Strangelovian scenarios. The federal government had put together secretly the single integrated operational plan, which brought together pretty much all the branches of the military, Air Force, Navy, conventional Army, Department of Defense installations, domestic installations within the country, State Department installations, and other special national security level branches, and integrated them into a single plan that was planning for a possibility of an all-out nuclear retaliation, a total annihilation scenario.
The world shuddered at the thought, for this catastrophic weapon struck fear in the minds of men all over the world.
During this time, Strategic Air Command and other specialized installations were already underground, but they were beginning to push for a whole new level of major, deeply buried, super hardened facilities that could withstand any conceivable attack at all. And even then, there were doubts. And this stuff was basically all secret at the time, but the plans have since become unclassified. And I came across it in this document, The Evolution of U.S. Strategic Command and Control and Warning during the period starting in 1945, going all the way to 42. And it discusses the renewed interest in a deep underground command center with enough man space and materials for the government to survive, for important people to be there, for military operators to continue communications even in spite of really anything that might happen. And so with the growing threat of bigger and bigger weapons, they weren't satisfied with normal underground command posts. They wanted redundant posts, and they wanted something that was buried deep enough it could withstand anything. Not that that's even the only reason. And they discuss a lot of existing and better known installations underneath the Pentagon, at Offutt Air Force Base, at Fort Ritchie, but they specifically talk about building a deep underground command center near Washington for the president and other high-level cabinet members and other important military people to get to in case of whatever. So they had to be able to get to it secretly, securely, underground. Just think about that. And they wanted a super hard command post that would be, according to this document, 3,000 to 4,000 feet underground. That's not a glorified basement. That's not merely underground. That is deeply buried underneath the surface at a completely different level than the society that we live in. And the surface level reason for this is it would protect against high yield weapons. But really, once operations continue down there, that's a whole nother infrastructure, a whole nother sector of society that could even be a basis for what a lot of people have termed the breakaway civilization. And there's a lot of evidence that I think hints that that stuff is going on.
The discovery of a desert base for an airborne task force, kept secret even from the President of the United States. This is the astounding story of a military plot to overthrow the government of the United States, which, if successful, would change the fate of every American.
But the curious thing is the duck proposal for the Deep Underground Command Center and several other proposals discussed in this document were all shot down. They supposedly were just, too expensive, and they supposedly never happened. I find that very hard to swallow. Maybe they didn't have the money supposedly in the 1960s, but at this point in time, there's all kinds of money not even remotely accounted for going to the Pentagon. In fact, the day before 9/11, in 2001, the Pentagon had to go public with the fact that it couldn't account for $2.3 trillion in its budget.
According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
2.3 trillion with a T.
And that doesn't even get into black budget money that is beyond the reach of Congress or anyone in a position of power to account for. This is not transparent money. So, of course, everything in this proposal supposedly never happened. But given the mindset of people in charge, and given basically all the things that they have to benefit from a structure like this, why not? It's expensive, but not inconceivable to build underground. There's transportation that's been built in underground tunnels since the late 1800s. And we know that some of these underground centers exist, but 3,000 to 4,000 feet down, that's just something most people can't even conceive of and generally wouldn't believe. But the drilling equipment exists, the tunnel boring machines exist, and these things probably are down there. It's just difficult to say exactly how many, exactly where, and exactly how far down they are without some kind of advanced technology to map that stuff out. Of course, they want it to be secret. It's a national security issue, whatever. We're talking about the kind of place they parodied in the Chevy Chase, Dan Aykroyd movie Spies Like Us, where they go to the abandoned movie theater and a bunch of scary-looking dudes with guns say, "Won't you gentlemen have a Pepsi?" And then this happens. Some kind of facility that looks limited, benign, abandoned, what have you, supposedly leading to a super elevator that goes deep, deep, deep under the ground to a facility that has multi-levels, almost unlimited square footage, and army personnel hiding out down there like ants. I mean, if you ever thought the military command structure resembled ant hives, it becomes literal at the point where you factor in the deep underground command centers. The problem is, they change these acronyms around. So first it surfaces in proposals as a deep underground command center. There's another proposal in the same document for the PACCS plan, which was an airborne command post, and it involved several phases of operation. And since this time period, they have continuously, on a 24-hour, 7-day basis, year after year, had aircraft continuously in the air and specialized ships continuously on the water for the command and control center. And you'll see they also proposed in these same plans a deep underground support center. Same concept, different acronym that the document says was going to be very deep and super hard. But that supposedly was never built either. Supposedly the reason was budget. But where are we today? I don't want to speculate too much. I'm just trying to show you where this begins, to show the people who doubt it altogether that this is very much something that was talked about. It was considered feasible. And by this point, there probably have been several of them built. This is a beginning point. There's at least this much. There's at least these proposals. And I just find it hard to see how people with that much power and the kind of money they accumulated would even avoid the temptation, the tantalizing temptation to build one of these things, or many of them. Then again, at the same time, a lot of the stories about the dozens and hundreds of bases that supposedly all have underground centers in them, well, they're all tainted with unprovable, larger-than-life elements, like claims that there's underground alien bases, that they house demonic beings, that there are human-animal hybrids out of fiction and everything else. And maybe that stuff is going on, but the question is, Where's the evidence for it? And the question is, why do all the stories about DUMBs, deep underground military bases, automatically come with the fixtures of unprovable, speculative, fantasy material? These were very real Cold War proposals, supposedly shot down, possibly scuttled to the black budget side of things. In the facilities that have been built, there are admittedly underground cities, complete with hospitals, cafeterias, housing areas, barbers and dentists, and pretty much everything else you could think of, along with all the military communications equipment in case of all-out nuclear war or any other scenario. And there are people in these centers around the clock every day of the year continually operating down there. They live there for however long before they're rotated back out, and it's all underneath our feet. The public knows very little about it. I would love to know exactly where all these places are. I've looked through these state-by-state detailed lists. I haven't been able to look at every example. A lot of them, like the admitted Cheyenne Mountain facility where NORAD is housed, are buried in the mountains. But when you look at them on Google Maps, it's difficult to see the entrances. I mean, I've seen the NORAD one. I've looked at some of the others. It's not always that easy to tell. Then again, they're intentionally hidden, buried underground, and unless someone who's been down there is talking about it, or unless someone is in an eyewitness position to see certain activities, it's difficult to nail down and pinpoint. And yet, it's grippingly fascinating. How far does this stuff go? How extensive is it? Because of the very nature of these secret underground structures, it's very difficult to confirm. And besides, a lot of it gets caught up in stories about extraterrestrials and crazy things allegedly going on in these places. But I thought I would start closer to the surface, no pun intended. I've been looking through some declassified Cold War materials, and I came across the Deep Underground Command Center that was officially proposed in 19... And for years I've heard the accounts and the rumors about the network of secret underground bases connected by railway tunnel with hyperfast trains spread out all across the country. But I don't think I'm the only one who's curious about exactly how far the secret government infrastructure goes. But it's undeniable that one exists. At a minimum, there are dozens of estimated secret bunkers and hidden military installations for the continuity of government in case of nuclear attack or other extreme scenario. And many people know that it was put into operation on the day of 9/11.